It is great to be here this morning. I appreciate the invitation by the Harlingen congregation to be able to speak before you. It is a privilege to be here, and what a weekend. Thank you guys at North 7th Street for the preparation and the well-executed plan. It's been a fantastic weekend. I want to take just a moment before I get started and thank congregations all over the Brotherhood. We had a family in our congregation, an older couple. He's got dementia. She's 78. They lost their home when that hurricane came through Houston a couple of weeks ago. And there have been donations that have poured in from a lot of places to help them. And I just want to say on behalf of that family, thank you, thank you, thank you. College Park is helping them as well and certainly want to help. They've got a lot of decisions to make. But right now they're staying with family and that kind of thing, but their home's been totally destroyed. But thank you guys so much for what you do in so many different ways. I've been blessed to have been given a subject this morning that I'm passionate about. And sometimes you get assigned topics that you have to become passionate about. But this one I truly am passionate about. I want to share some things with you this morning related to being a follower of Christ to becoming a fisher of men. I want to get started by just reviewing a little bit of yesterday. That when we start talking about disciples making disciples, it's got to be real, it's got to be authentic. Thank you, Anthony, for the message yesterday. Excellent job. It's got to be start in our homes. My dad told me years ago, he said, you can go out and try to save the world. If you lose your family, you've lost what it's all about. And I just want to tell you that we just can't. We've got to recognize the importance of leadership in our homes, our moms and our dads, and keeping our kids faithful to the church and teaching and training and that kind of thing. I want to do a little bit of an exercise here just for the fun of it. Mario, you got a calculator out? Mario's an engineering guy, so he ought to be able to do it in his brain, but I'm going to let him use a calculator. But let's just say we're going to go start a congregation. We're going to try to build a congregation with disciples, trying to create more disciples. And Ty and Lisa get together, and that's 2 people. So you're going to start with 2. And then Ty and Lisa had 4 daughters. What are we up to, Mario? 6. Those 4 daughters got married. What are we up to? 10. Let's just say for the fun of it that each one of those 4 daughters had 3 children apiece. Are we at a total of 22? So we added 12 to 10 and we got 22 people. In just short order, if we can keep our families to be a part of the kingdom of Christ. 22 people. We got a start of a congregation right there. And then let's just say that Ty and Lisa get together with Leland and Kathy. You got a calculator? Leland and Kathy are 2. So we're at 24. Are we there? They had how many kids, Mario? 9 kids. That's it. So what are we up to? 33. I'm trusting you from this point on. 33, they each get married. Janessa, we're still looking for good things from you, gal. We're at 42 people, okay? And then let's just say for the fun of it, each one of them have 3 kids apiece. So that would be 9 times 3. We're at a congregation of 69 people in short order. That doesn't even include Jerry and Kathy and 4 kids and 3 kids apiece and married. Now here, I understand that life doesn't always play out that perfectly. I know that. Kathy's not with us anymore. Leland is remarried to Jill after Kathy's passing. They moved to Arkansas. Supposedly it's better up there. I've heard a rumor that it's better up there. Amy married Jameson. Supposedly it's better in Tennessee. I know all of life doesn't work out that cleanly. I know that. I recognize that. But I want you to just see and imagine for just a moment how important it is as you, for a mom and a dad, to teach and to train your children. how powerful that is when we start talking about building congregations and making disciples across the world. It starts with our home. Thank you, David, for the message yesterday. To turn our neighbors into disciples, to care about others, to study with them and start kind of where they're at and help them. Rusty, thank you for the message yesterday. Brother Ian, I had Brother Lee on the brain, couldn't get it off. Brother Ian did a great job in talking to us about how we need to have a compassionate concern for souls, the ability to weep for souls and concerned about their salvation. And yes, that starts at home, but it's everywhere. That's the message to go to all of the world in that process, having a global perspective. And thank you, Brother Robert. What a privilege to have you guys with us over here in the States. And then Brent did an outstanding job of talking about each one of us have individual responsibility to be alive, make a difference in the world and the community that you're in. Good job, Brother Brent, and thank you. And today, I've been commissioned with taking the idea of somebody being a follower of Christ and becoming a fisher of men. Matthew chapter 4 and verse number 19, he said unto them, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. And I just want to tell you, really, if you're following Christ, you'll become a fisher of men. You will care about the souls of others. You will share the gospel with those that are around you. 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse number 2 was used quite a bit yesterday. The things which you've heard among me, among many witnesses, the same, commit these to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. Sorry, it's the King James, New King James thing. And I just want to tell you, there have been people that have invested in me, that spent time in me, and money in me, and effort in me. And when I was 12 years old, Brother Jay Henderson put his arm around me and said, why don't you come travel with me for the summer? And I said, you bet. We'd drive down the road and we'd memorize scripture. One of the very first passages of scripture I ever memorized was Romans 1:16. I remember driving down the road with Jay Henderson. And I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it's the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. And we quoted it and quoted it and quoted it. And we just kept a list of scriptures that we memorized. And I spent the summer with him. And he invested time and effort in me. Somewhere along the way, Terry Newell called and said, why don't you come hold a meeting in Shawnee, Oklahoma? I went, I've never held a meeting before. I don't know. I'm 15 years old, guys. I don't even drive. I'm living at home. Come hold us a meeting. You know what Shawnee, Oklahoma was doing? They were investing in a young man, is what they were doing. It wasn't because he had amazing sermons. It's because they were investing in somebody and giving somebody opportunity. Shortly thereafter, we agreed to do that, but my dad said, you're going to preach to me first. I don't want you to preach to anybody else and I not know what's going to come out of your mouth. So he was a wise man. But shortly after that, one night, we got a knock on the door. It's Brother Herschel Williams and Adrian Bowers from Baytown. And they sat in our living room. I remember it like it was yesterday. They sat in our living room one evening. They were elders at Baytown, Texas, and they said, we've heard you're going to hold a meeting in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and we thought it'd be a good idea if you practiced in Baytown, Texas before you went to Shawnee. So the very first meeting I ever held was in Baytown, Texas. Somewhere to the tune of 1979, 1980, something like that. 15 years old. Stayed with Brother Herschel and Sister Catherine. They were so gracious. How many of y'all, raise your hands if you know that there were congregations started in the 1905 range? You familiar with congregations that were started in 1905? I can tell you one, Gallatin, Texas. Somebody started a congregation. How many of y'all know there were congregations started in the 1920s? I can tell you one, Mont Belvieu, Texas. How many of y'all know of congregations that were started through the 50s and 60s? You're familiar with it. There have been people that have invested in starting congregations in places, and it isn't easy. It's a challenge. But I can tell you places. Baytown was started in the 40s. Herschel Williams came over there with Adrian and some other folks in mid-1940s, started a congregation in Baytown. Do you know Baytown has helped start a congregation in Beaumont? helped start a congregation in Pearland, helped start a congregation in Lake Jackson, with the help of Brother Roy Hazelton doing church work back in those days. And I'm not limited it to that. I imagine Channelview was in the mix of that. Some of the Baytown folks could tell me. I'm going to tell you some history this morning, but I'm going to tell it to you from my perspective. I'm not claiming to have all knowledge about it. I'm just going to give you the history as I understand it, that I've witnessed. Lisa and I, for 41 years, have been doing full-time church work. And I'm just going to share some things with you this morning. And it, at the end of the story, has to do with the fact that people invested in me, and I feel a compelling need to invest in others. College Park was invested in. I feel a compelling need as a congregation to invest in other things, other works, and other places. And I hope you have that drive this morning. I've shown this chart in a couple of different instances, but I want you to see this. I want you to get the vision. Look at the very top of this chart, and we've got a church body, and I know it's not a church house, and that's what I've got drawn, but it's the body of Christians. And we're looking across the world of establishing congregations that are thriving, living bodies of the Lord's people. And I can tell you, you can go across the world, and we struggle from congregation to congregation with the next thing that's on that list, and that is recognized, ordained elders and deacons in these congregations. It is a challenge. We need elder-led congregations and father-led homes. But the way you get elders is we have to develop teachers. We have to invest time and effort, and we've got to develop teachers, because one of the qualifications for a teacher is that he be apt to teach. He's got to be able to exhort and convince the gainsayer, whose mouths must be stopped. The only way we're going to solve that problem is we've got to have teachers in our congregation. Good, solid teaching. How do we get teachers? We've got to have some good, godly men living good, godly lives to ever get to the fact that they could teach others. You've got to live it first. And we need good, godly men that are living biblical lives like Brother Brent talked about yesterday and these speakers talked about yesterday. It's got to be real. It's got to be authentic. How do we get that? How do we get strong families? And I put down there self-control, because it's the teachings of Christ, that we live according to Scripture. And how do they learn to live according to Scripture unless we have people that preach it, evangelists, preachers that go and teach these things? Ephesians chapter 4, verse number 11. And he himself gave some apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to a perfect man, to the measure, the stature of the fullness of Christ. You know what the job is of evangelists and pastors or elders and teachers? You know what their job is? To equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. That's what Ephesians chapter 4 says. That we should be no longer children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the trickery of men and in the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting, but speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things into him who is the head, Christ. We don't want to be tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. We have elders and we have evangelists and we have teachers to help people, to equip people, so that we're not tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. Look at the result of that in Ephesians 4, verse number 16. From whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. The body works together. We ultimately get what it is that we're looking for. But do you know, elders ordain evangelists, evangelists ordain elders? That entire chart is cyclical from top to bottom, and it's a continual process. Now, my history, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that history. I promise you this morning, it's not an ego trip for me. It's because I care about the church. But the history that I have in the last 41 years and the things that I've seen are only in a period of time. There were things that happened before me. There are things that will happen after time's long gone. But while I'm here, I've got a job to do. While you're here, you've got a job to do. This is your time to make a difference in your family. It's your time to make a difference in your congregation. Romans chapter 10 says, "For whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. How then shall they call on him of whom they've not believed? How shall they believe in him of whom they've not heard? How shall they hear without a preacher? How shall they preach unless they're sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the gospel of peace, who bring glad tidings of good things. But they have not all obeyed the gospel. For Isaiah said, Lord, who has believed our report? So then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God." How many of y'all honor the fact that there are guys that preach the gospel? I honor that. I honor the fact we've got elders in the church that lead the church and care about it. How many of you honor the fact we got teachers that work to teach our congregations? It takes time. It takes effort. How many of y'all honor that? How beautiful are the feet of them? There's a passage, Matthew chapter 13. "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, and when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had, and he bought it." Brother Timothy was preaching recently on the pearl of great price, and as he taught, he mentioned this point, and it struck with me. He said this merchant saw value. That's why he went and sold all that he had, because he found the pearl of great price. But if he didn't understand value, he wouldn't have recognized it was a pearl of great price. He had to understand what value is. And I want to tell you, it's valuable for us to have evangelists, and it's valuable for us to have elders, and it's valuable for us to have teachers in our congregation that recognize their responsibility, that share their time and their talent and their money and all those things. It's valuable. Do you value it? That's my question for you this morning. Do you value it? There's a commercial, and it's an insurance commercial. And it shows like a car that crashed into a wall, some strange things that have taken place. Anyway, the commercial ends with, "I know a few things because I've seen a few things." So I want to share some things with you this morning. It's not an ego trip. I just want to share them because I've been doing this for 41 years, and I want to share with you some of the things I've seen, because I'm thinking at times our young people don't have a perspective of this thing. I think sometimes the folks sitting on our pew don't have a perspective of some of the things that have happened. I'm just going to share with you some things. There are other things. It's not an exhaustive list, but there are some other things that have taken place. Some things Ty's not even aware of. But I'm going to share some things I am aware of, and I want to share them with you. Did y'all know that 30 years ago there was not a congregation in Conroe, Texas? You know why there is today? Because a few of us sat down with Herschel Williams and Adrian Bowers and Billy Ray Robertson and Beverly Keel, and they expressed a desire to have a work in that part of the country. And there were a lot of discussions and a lot of time and prayer and effort and money and all those kind of things spent in that work. That's why there's a congregation there today. Now you can say, well, you're just patting yourself on the back. I promise you I'm not. Because it wasn't just Ty. It's been a team of people. And it's team building. It's building groups of people that work together to ultimately accomplish the cause of the kingdom. But I'm telling you, 30 years ago, there was not a congregation there. How do you get a congregation? And let me tell you why I bring some of this up. Occasionally, evangelists hear people snipe. They kind of take pot shots at preachers, and that's what I mean by do you value it? They go, well, there's nobody willing to go to small, struggling congregations. There's nobody willing to go where there's nobody, where there's no congregation of people, where there's nothing, and start from the ground up. Nobody's willing to do that. How far do you think that kind of complaint stuff goes with me? Somebody that's doing that is ignorant of what is taking place. And I just want to encourage you guys, do you know the people that will tear down? There are people that love to tear down. But you know the people that tear down are not the people that invest in it. You put your money and your time and your effort in something, you're not tearing it down, you're building it up. You're going to be working at it. And you get somebody in the congregation that starts bad-mouthing what's going on in places, and I promise you the bad-mouthing is from people that's not supporting what's happening. It's from people that are trying to destroy, not from people that are investing in it. And I want to encourage you, do you value this? I know what's happened in Conroe, Texas, and I'm telling you there's been some sad times. There's been some heartaches. There's been tears shed. There's been some fantastic times. There's been some amazing moments. I'm glad I was there. But it ain't all been rosy. It's been a lot of work from a lot of people that put forth the effort because they cared about having a church in that community. Joe Richardson put his arm around me in the Plainview foyer in 1983. And he said, we wouldn't support you if we didn't have confidence in you. Go get them. That's Joe Richardson from Paradise, Texas. He wanted a church. He wanted evangelists to go preach. And we want to chatter sometimes in the background rather than value and say, how beautiful are the feet of those that go preach. I'm going to share some other stories with you. You know, 30 years ago, I held a meeting in Denton, Texas. Old Brother Wages was there then, and about 12 other people. In fact, one of my favorite stories is Brother Wages. At the very first night I'm holding the meeting, one of the dear sisters said, I want to introduce you to the senior member of our congregation, Brother Wages. Brother Wages is 93 and he had 17 children. There's church growth, Mario. And I said, oh, that would make you want to give up Christmas. I was just in Thai fashion, opened his mouth before he thought. What I did not realize is Brother Wages absolutely despised Christmas. And for the next hour, I sat there and listened to a sermon against Christmas in the foyer of the Denton Church House. I love Brother Wages. I'm not mocking Brother Wages. He believed what he believed, and he was in on what he believed. The congregation at Denton suffered during those days. You know, Brother Michael McCorkle, these preachers that aren't willing to go to any place where there's not hardly any people and that kind of thing, Brother Michael McCorkle moved into Denton, Texas, and you know, have anybody been to Denton recently? They're in a different position, a totally different place than they were 30 years ago. I'm telling you that because I've seen it. I witnessed it with nothing or almost nothing, and I've seen the growth. They've got elders in place and deacons in place. It's amazing what's happened in Denton. Anybody familiar with Pearland, Texas? Brother Roy helped establish a congregation there years ago. Brother Beverard was there. Brother Justin moved there in the 80s. When Brother Justin moved there, which kind of incorporates into those years that I'm somewhat aware of, he moved there. Brother Beverard was not happy. In fact, I was in a meeting with Brother Beverard when he was not happy. He wanted help in Pearland, Texas. Brother Justin and Sister Karen moved there. And I just want to tell you, Pearland's in a different place today because of work that's happened over the last 30, 40 years. I saw it. There are people in this room today that have seen it. They had 12 people in the room and contributions of $250 a Sunday. And they're meeting a whole different crowd now with elders in place and contributions of whatever. I'm going to make up a number, but I'm telling you, it's $2,500 a Sunday or $3,500 a Sunday. Total different place than they were at 30 years ago. Do y'all value that? How valuable is it to have a congregation in Pearland, Texas? Are you thankful for that? Somebody spent a lot of time and effort and energy to have a congregation in Pearland, Texas. I've got some others. There's a congregation started in northwest Arkansas. People say, oh, no, preachers won't go. They won't establish congregation. Just in the last several years, this congregation in northwest Arkansas, some young guys, Brother Pat Manning. Baytown's been very involved in Brother Pat Manning's support for years. Brother Pat has done exactly what he's asked to do. You may disagree with Pat on some things, but let me tell you what Pat's done. He went to Aurora, and 12 people turned into a congregation with elders and so forth in place. Over time, North Ark exists today, involved in Brother Pat's work. I'm not saying Brother Pat did it by himself. I'm saying he built teams of people, and they're in Northwest Arkansas with a congregation today, a new congregation. Over the last several years, I think they're meeting 40 to 50 people. I've been there, visited. That's how many people were there that day. Somebody here may know a more accurate number. I'm just telling you, how valuable is it for you to have a congregation in Northwest Arkansas? How valuable is it that there's a congregation at North Ark? How valuable is it that there's a congregation in Aurora? Do you value it, or do we just take pot shots at it? And I just want to tell you, if I'm going to sit on one side of that camp or the other, I'm going to sit on the camp that values the hard work and labor of folks. Y'all seen Harlingen? I held a meeting in Harlingen in 1983. At the end of the meeting, they offered to either pay me with a check. Now, Lisa and I had been married 6 months. They offered to pay me with a check, or one of the leaders of the church at that point in time owned a jewelry store. They said, you can go home with a ring for your wife. Anybody want that decision? We didn't have any money, but I went home with a ring. Love you, babe. Harlingen's in a totally different place today than they were at 30 plus years ago. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. I've seen the growth. I've seen the work. I've seen the effort. It's a total different place. Do we value that? How important is that to us to have a congregation in Harlingen, Texas? There's a congregation in Austin. How many people knew there was a congregation meeting in Austin? How valuable is that to y'all? That there's a congregation meeting in Austin. They're a relatively newer group and all that. I mean, but somebody's putting the time in. They're spending and being spent to make that happen. How valuable is that to you? Y'all been to Tulsa? I went to my first trip in Tulsa this year, this summer, held a meeting for them. Fantastic group of people. Doesn't take you very long to look at that crowd. Rusty and Lori have been there about 7 years. Doesn't take you very long to look at that crowd and realize that about 3/4 of that crowd wasn't there 7 years ago. How important is it for y'all to have a congregation in Tulsa, Oklahoma? Somebody's put labor in. I'm not saying it's just Rusty and Lori. I love Rusty and Lori. I honor the work that they're doing. I'm just saying that they're trying to build a team of people to do work. They want a lot of folks involved in that work and helping with that work. Anybody been to Gallatin, Texas? Brother Michael McCorkle, I think he's in the crowd today. Brother Michael and I got a phone call, and we went down there and we visited with about 12 people years ago. And we began to discuss with the congregation there. They had dwindled down to nothing, and that's another little point I want to make. You know, it'd be really nice to work with some congregations that hadn't dwindled down to nothing first. Yeah, let's ask for success from our evangelists. Here, go work with this congregation that used to have 100 members. Now they have 12. God bless. How about when we're 100 members, we do what it is we're supposed to be doing and functioning like a body of Christ and making disciples? I'm just telling you, in my knowledge of Gallatin, Texas, they're in a total different place today than they were at years ago. And there's been a lot of work done in Gallatin, Texas. Been a lot of doors knocked and a lot of Bible studies done, a lot of miles driven in Gallatin, Texas. Anybody been to Amarillo lately? How valuable is it to have a congregation in Amarillo, Texas? What does that mean to you? I held meetings in Amarillo in the early 80s or mid 80s. Me and 6 other people were in the room. Amarillo's in a totally different place than they're at today. And I don't know, Trevor, 140, 160 people on Sunday morning, elders and deacons in place. They're a functioning, like living body. That's what you're wanting. Brother Craig and Sister Dee work there with the congregation, and it's not about Brother Craig and Sister Dee. They're probably embarrassed I'm bringing their name up. But they built teams of people. They wanted a church to work. What time did you say, Chase, I needed to be done? How valuable is it to have a congregation in Lubbock, Texas? I preached there in the 80s. I'm telling you, they're in a different place today. Stillwater, Oklahoma, there were 3 guys who went to college at OSU, And there was not a congregation in the community. They said, we need a congregation in the community. They graduated. They stayed in Stillwater and started a congregation there. Stillwater's in a total different place than they were at. Gunner, Texas. I held meetings there in the 80s. Man, you guys ought to go to Gunner sometime. Singing. Total different place than it was. How valuable is it to have a congregation in Gunner, Texas? Bogachetta, Mississippi. Brad Benoit will remember this. We were in a car and we drove all the way to Bogachetta, put shingles on a gas station so they'd start a congregation over there. Now you're thinking Brad Benoit, attorney. Yes, but he can roof a church building. I've seen it with my own eyes. There's a congregation in Bogachetta today, elders in place. Total different situation than what it was 30 and 40 years ago. McMinnville, Tennessee, young, thriving families in that congregation today. It is a blessing to see what's happening in McMinnville, Tennessee today. Norman, Oklahoma, I held meetings in Norman years ago. How valuable is it to you to have a congregation in Norman? They're in a total different position than they were at 30 or 40 years ago. Gainesville, Texas, a lot of young families meet in Gainesville. How important is it for you to have a congregation in that community? Wheeler, Texas, y'all been to Wheeler? That's the Allison congregation. They're twice the size they were 30 years ago. Total different situation than 30, 40 years ago. Shawnee, Oklahoma. Y'all been to Shawnee lately? Again, total different situation. North Ark, I mentioned them. Aurora. Now, I mentioned these. I'm not trying to leave anybody else out. There's a ton, and there's more. This is not an exhaustive list. I'm just saying to you sitting in an audience today, how valuable is it to have that work? What's it worth to you on a Sunday morning when you write a check and you put in the contribution plate? What's it worth to you? We've had some other situations. How many of y'all, raise your hand if you don't mind. Raise your hand if you know there was a congregation started in Huntsville, Texas in the 70s. You know that congregation's not there today. There's been some challenges along the way. That congregation's not there today. You know why? Multiple reasons. It's somewhat complex. But in short order, because as a congregation, it wasn't really set up properly to begin with to start a congregation, and some other people came in and outvoted them in a business meeting, and the building essentially got taken away. Our brethren invested in a building and then lost it. Spring, Texas, I've got them up there. How many of y'all know in the 80s our brethren started a congregation in Spring, Texas? Coy Potter worked with a congregation some there. There are people in this room today that were strong, steadfast members of the Spring congregation. Jim Bryant helped the congregation there when it first started as well, and others. It's not with us today. That building was sold and those funds went into another project that our brethren have benefited from. But my point is, it's not there today. It's heartbreaking, and I can tell you some others that have closed their doors in those years. But I'm telling you, there's people in this room today that were members of that congregation that went through some very difficult, struggling, challenging times. They spent and were spent and would spend again. And they're still standing, still alive today. After some very challenging, and they had some certain circumstances that didn't lend to their favor. They had one of their church leaders died and another church leader moved, and it kind of left them with a vacuum of leadership, and it was just a challenge for them. The congregation no longer exists. My heart breaks. How valuable would it have been for us as a people? And there's more of those stories as well. Luke 14:28 says, "For which of you intended to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it?" We've got some things that are hindering us in church work, and one of those is that vision, seeing it, visualizing it in the future. And when I say that, I'm not focused on the fact it doesn't have enough money to finish it, because I've sat in a lot of church buildings that we didn't have sheetrock on the walls. We were just glad to have a place to meet that wasn't in the sun, didn't have air conditioning because we couldn't afford it yet. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff, but I'm talking about the kind of people that are going to be with it to see it through. They're going to be there till it's done. They're involved. They care about it. They're committed to it. Finances is another thing that we're challenged with. It's just challenges that we're facing. Vision is a part of it, but finances, people giving. On Sunday morning, sacrificial giving. We want to partially support evangelists and then want amazing results. And something's got to change. And it starts with us individually saying we're committed to this. What's it value to you? What's its value? 1 Corinthians chapter 9 says, even so the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should live from the gospel. Are we going to support guys or are we not going to support them? What's its value? Now I put this up here, decisions that hamper our efforts. And what I really wanted to write was we shoot ourselves in the foot. Because that's probably a more accurate description. And let me describe to you what I mean by shoot ourselves in the foot. We don't set it up properly, so we give away a building we built. Because there's not an evangelist in charge of setting things in order and ordaining elders and leadership and that kind of thing. So we just give the building away to somebody else because somebody outvoted them in a business meeting. It wasn't set up properly. We have times when congregations have closed their doors, like I demonstrated in the spring situation, but those funds went to another church project. I've seen buildings that were our brethren built, put up, etc., and then the building sells because the group didn't work or whatever happened, and the money just disappears. Goes into the bank account of some person that just sold a building. We're shooting ourselves in our foot when we do that. Finances are enough of a struggle without taking the resources that have been put into the brotherhood, and we just squander it. And it just disappears. Something's wrong. If I look angry, I'm not angry, I'm just passionate, by the way. I am kind of angry about some of that. So we cut our sales force. We need a new sound system, so let's cut our evangelists. We need a new fellowship building, so let's cut our evangelists. We need a this, so let's cut our evangelists. What are we valuing? How important is this to us? We fall for Satan's devices. We hand a phone to a young teenage boy and say, go figure it out, make your way through life. No training, no instruction, no warnings, no boundaries in place. We get young men addicted to pornography or young ladies addicted to pornography or alcohol or drugs or whatever the addiction is. Or we fall for Satan's devices that some new program is going to change the whole philosophy of the church. People, I can tell you, there are people in this crowd today, I promise you after this is over, is going to go, really? That's all you got? Really? We're the thousands of people. I can tell you, I'm not in the goal of just trying to attract people. If we just want to attract people, we can attract people. I'm in the goal of trying to get people to change their lives for Christ. And that's a different ball game. Don't discount the value of what we are doing as a people. It is valuable. But we fall for Satan's devices and we think some new shiny glimmering sort of whatever is going to solve all issues. And we can attract the crowd as though the crowd is the goal. Legacy giving. And I use that term basically just to mean this. Lisa and I will pass on from this earth. And we've got wills. And in our wills we sat down with an attorney and we say, this is what we want to have happen with our estate. And I'm just going to make up some numbers for you just for the fun of it. But let's say hypothetically my house is worth $300,000. I don't know what it's worth, but let's say it's worth $300,000. And next to my 2 acres, I've got 7.6 acres that I bought years and years and years ago that I do nothing with, just got a bunch of trees on it that fall during hurricanes. Lots of cleanup work to do. But the appraisal district tells me it's worth a lot of money every time they want taxes on it. And let's say hypothetically it's worth $200,000. And let's say that Ty and Lisa's estate, we don't have much. We've been doing church work for 41 years. But let's just say our estate's worth $500,000. And when we die, our kids are going to sell the place, and somebody else is going to live in it, and other people are going to drive by and go, oh, that's where Ty and Lisa used to live. That's what's going to happen. But let's just say it's worth $500,000. There's a lot of different ways to handle legacy giving, but let me tell you what Lisa and I did. We want our kids, when we're gone, to divide up assets. And instead of dividing it by 4 kids, we want to divide it by 5, and the church is one of them. So they're going to get 20% of our estate. Somebody can do the math, Mario. It's hypothetical, so that number ain't going to matter, right? But let me tell you, we shoot ourselves in the foot, don't we? Let me tell you what I mean by that. If my kids turn out to be heathens, they ain't getting a 5th. And yet I'm telling you, across this room here today, and across brethren all across the country, we've got kids that have turned out to be total heathens, and we're leaving them $1 million and leaving them $500,000 and leaving them. We are shooting ourselves in the foot when the kingdom of Jesus Christ needs financing. Somebody ought to be thinking about it. And I'm just telling you, if you're a follower of Christ and you're a fisher of men, that's where the passion is. And it's not about my kids gaining some small piece of an asset that I own. And honestly, I don't think they care about it that much. And I'm glad. Because I want them to care about the kingdom. Do you know feelings hamper us? We shoot ourselves in the foot. The Bible says, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, when I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child. When I became a man, I put away childish things. I'm just telling you, in some congregation, we just struggle with children. Absolute children that want to get their feelings hurt all the time. We need to grow up. We as a people, grow up. Stop getting your feelings hurt. Let's all get on the same mission. Let's preach the gospel. Let's push the gospel out. We spend a lot of time with this, oh, you hurt my feelings thing. Become a man. Become a woman. Grow up. Nobody's trying to hurt your feelings. We're trying to save souls. Pride. My pride is hurt. They wouldn't make me an elder. My pride is hurt. They wouldn't make me a deacon. My pride is hurt. So we walk away. Because my pride is hurt. Y'all know what pride does. God doesn't like pride. He resists the proud, gives grace to the humble. Lack of team building. It hampers us. It's not about tie. It's not about an individual. It's not about any one person in a congregation. It's about us together functioning as a body, as lively stones, living stones. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, I planted, Apollos watered. Who gave the increase? God gave the increase. We're just planting and watering. We're trying to make a difference. Help. And let me tell you one thing that shoots ourselves in the foot is apathy. People that just don't care. They just don't care enough. They don't care enough to show up for services. They don't care enough to show up for activities. They don't care enough to share with their neighbor. They don't care enough for, but I think one brother's going to cover over that next year. Zephaniah chapter 1 says, and punish the men who are settled in complacency. And I want to warn us this morning, let's not we've got a job to do, and it's a short window. I've shared with you 40-something years of history or 50-something years of history of just ties knowledge of some history and places. And I'm telling you, I just had a 60th birthday, and I am blown away how quick life is going by. And I'm just telling you, in 20 more years, guys, I'm 80. I'm coming to this meeting with a walker. No offense, 80-year-olds. Life is flying by. You know the time my voice is going to matter is right now when I'm sitting in a meeting. You know when your voice is going to matter? Right now. When you're sitting in a meeting or you're in a discussion, and you can be the guy that's snapping off to the side and criticizing everything that's happening, or you can sit in the discussion and go, guys, we need to be team building and building groups of people that can make a difference in the kingdom. Ephesians chapter 4, we've got to equip people for the work of the ministry. So as we close, I want to give you some ideas, because years ago, there was a guy by the name of Mid McKnight wrote a book called Journey to Eternity. Jay Henderson took that book, and some others, but Jay Henderson took that book and took 5 studies out of that book, and he went around from church to church. And I remember in Turnersville, Texas, him bringing those studies out and saying, here's a tool. Here's a way to help teach somebody the gospel. If you've never been through a 5-part Bible study, you need to go through it. Do it with a friend. Do it with somebody else in the congregation. Do it with another Christian person. Learn how to do them. Learn how to give them. Learn how to share the Bible with people. And that is a tool. I'm not saying it's the only tool. I'm just saying it's a tool. And there have been people that have sniped at us over time. And they'll go, the 5-part Bible study doesn't do anything. Door work doesn't do anything. And they're saying that to a guy, and we had 5 families at the time going to church with us from door-to-door work that went through the 5-part Bible study and obeyed the gospel, and they were worshiping with us in our place. How far do you think that criticism goes with me? It's laughable. Learn it. Let us help you, equip you. I will help you learn it. But I promise you, there's a ton of people, and you want to talk about the last 40 years, it's a total different ballgame today, because on any given night, there are people in Baytown, Texas, and Pearland, Texas, and College Park, and other places all over this world that are doing 5-part Bible studies with people. And it happened because one guy took Mid McKnight's book and said, we can go save the lost. Frank, did he ever go through those studies with you? Once or twice, didn't he? I mean, we have been blessed to have a guy like Jay. What's that value? What's that value to you when you contribute on Sunday morning? What's that worth to you? There's another study called Making Jesus Lord of My Life. The people that put that study together, in the very bottom of the study, actually said, feel free to copy, change, whatever, use it. I like to use it for after conversion studies. I like to use it for pre-marriage counseling. It's a great study. Talks about a lot of different ways that we make Jesus Lord of my life. If you're not familiar with that study, we've got them in electronic format. I know it because I typed it in Word, and I've got it electronically. You don't have to Xerox it. Be happy to email it to you. If it's a great study, learn it, use it. It's a tool. Discipleship studies. David Menson's done a lot of work on discipleship studies. What's that value to you? Any of y'all raise your hand and use the discipleship series that David Menson put together? It's a great series. Thank you, David, for putting the work in on it. I mean, it's no small task. What's the value of that to you? Use it. Learn it. Understand you've got tools out there. Leadership studies. David also put together some leadership studies, 10 parts on leadership. Great series. I'm not saying it's the only series. I'm not saying this is an exhaustive list of series. I'm just giving you tools because my job is to help equip the saints, and I want you to be equipped so that we can go be fishers of men. And I can't underestimate or undervalue, whatever the word is I'm looking for, the importance of your daily Bible study, your daily reading. Y'all read Muscle on a Shovel? Raise your hand. I can tell you stories of people that have obeyed the gospel off of Muscle on a Shovel. And all it is handing a book to someone. It's a great book. It's a great training. Our job is to try to help equip the saints. Matthew 9 and verse number 37. He said to his disciples, the harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. You know what I want? I want laborers in the kingdom. I want a team of people. Yes, I may be supported, and yes, I may be helping to lead the team or whatever, but I want a team, people. Let me tell you what College Park wants. There have been brethren all over this country that have invested in us. And let me tell you what College Park wants. We want to team up with other congregations that want to do the same thing and invest in others. How would y'all like to have a congregation in Corpus Christi? What would that value be? How many of y'all would like to have a congregation in Tomball or West Houston? What value would that be? How many of y'all like to see a congregation in Longview, Texas, or other place? Pick the place. I'm less concerned about the place as I am the legacy that we're leaving behind. College Park wants to team up with Brother Brent talked about it yesterday. We want to team up with congregations that share that same vision and want to plant congregations. Can we put together the right leadership and the right team and go into a community and recognize this is a long haul? This is not an easy task. You're going to weep. You're going to sweat. It's not going to be easy. And you know, not everybody's going to be the supported evangelist. And I can tell you, by my side for the last 40-something years has been Jerry and Kathy. And I'm telling you, Jerry and Kathy have not done the full-time evangelism thing. Jerry went and got a job, a real job. In fact, years ago, I had a brother looked at me and said the same thing. He said, Ty, you've got 4 kids now. Don't you think it's about time you got a real job? See, he didn't really value what we do. But Jerry and Kathy, I can't begin to tell you, have made sacrifices upon sacrifices and have signed the bottom line and said, we're here and we're going to make this happen. And to have a partner like that has been huge. We got to the end of our College Park building project, and there were 3 of us that signed the bottom line for $400,000, and I'm just telling you, it was a ton of money for people that don't have money. But we were doing it on faith that we were going to be able to have teams of people that can help. We're going to grow. We just really felt like at the time we were making a 50-year decision, not a 10-year decision. And we borrowed money to do it. And there were some people that didn't want to borrow money. Well, I understand that. I don't borrow money. I don't like to borrow money. I have borrowed money. I just don't like to borrow money. I'm telling you, this was a 50-year decision. So we borrowed $400,000. We got near the end of that project, just real close. We didn't count the cost quite good enough. And we needed $30,000 more dollars. I mean, we needed it. And in my driveway at the time, we had 4 teenage girls, and they all drove anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 vehicles. And Mama Lisa and Papa Ty drove. We weren't Papa Ty and Mama Lisa at the time, but we drove $3,000 and $5,000 vehicles, and Jerry and Kathy drove $3,000 and $5,000 vehicles, and I saw everybody there. Every trailer I had, every car I had, every car they had. We signed the titles over, and we went to a bank and handed all those titles to a banker who gave us $30,000 to finish that building so we could get in it. Somebody come tell me that Jerry and Kathy don't love the kingdom. It's a tough sell. I'm just telling you, it's laughable to me. Come tell me that Jerry doesn't care about what's going on at College Park when he's signing over his title and he's signing the bottom line to a $400,000 loan. I'm telling you, I've been partnered with a guy and a couple, including Kathy and, of course, Lisa, partnered, and we have had the ability to have some people that were committed to the team. And we've had others that have joined that team and been a part of that team and been a part of that effort. It's been a lot of time and effort, a lot of labor. But don't come tell me they don't love the church. You're not going to convince me, because I've been in the trenches with them. We need disciples. We need laborers. We need finances. We need all those other, but we need laborers that are willing to do what it takes to accomplish that. Can God depend on you to be a part of that? Do you know in the first century there was one Jesus, he had 12 disciples, turned to 120 in Acts chapter 1. Acts chapter 2 went to 3,000. Acts chapter 3 went to 4,000. Acts chapter 4 went to 5,000 men. Acts chapter 6, a multitude, the disciples multiplied. You know what the power that's in this room could do? It's amazing what this group could do if we walk out of here and we become fishers of men. Take the mantra, take the training, take the equipping. And I'm telling you, there are a ton of people in this room that will help you with it. They care about you. It's not all easy. It's not all rosy. There's pain, there's trials, there's troubles, there's tribulations, there's struggles. But I'm telling you, there are people that will help you through it. Join the team. Have you obeyed the gospel? Have you decided to put your feet in the camp of the kingdom of Jesus Christ? There is no greater effort. What do you value? I'm just telling you, I value the church. I love the church with all my heart. Love it. I hope you have that kind of passion for the church. And I hope you go back to your congregations And when you have opportunity to open your mouth, that it's opened in a very positive way of what can we do to help grow the kingdom of Jesus Christ? What can we do to push the gospel in our community? And here am I. Send me. If the church can help you with a spiritual need this morning, maybe you've found yourself kind of sidetracked and priorities wrong, things like that. Make a decision today to make it different. Make a decision today as we sing this song to come to Christ in full 100% commitment to his cause, and do so as we stand and sing this song.